I noticed that most people love to be entertained, and they like fantastical notions and highly imaginative narratives. People like to hear these things. Like even when I believed in space, you have these characters like David Wilcock and Stephen Greer, and of course you had Dr. Delbert Blair, and these guys would just tell you all of these so-called esoteric historic facts, which turn out to be actually nothing. I mean, they're made up. And truth be told, the more you really observe, you do realize that 99% of people cannot tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And even me, I mean, I've fallen for fantastical notions also. But it's almost like we can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, or we don't want to. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that life is hard and it's very mundane. It gets, repetitive and played out. So people start seeking, they think they're seeking knowledge, but really they're seeking an escape. And this escapism causes you to fall prey to these mythical notions. Like I mentioned in one video, a lot of this stuff is written by creative, intelligent minds, but it's no different from a screenwriter. I mean, Star Wars is a cool movie, but it's not real. And since space and globular worlds are definitely not real, well then we know that's totally fake. So it's just it's a story. Now it has wisdom in it because it's the hero's journey. But of course, it has to come in the clothing of this hyper sci-fi galactic space battles and just all kinds of creatures and aliens and delusions. I mean, basically, in the sense that people actually go to Star Wars conventions. Then it becomes a delusion when you put on the costumes and shit. It's like, okay, goddamn. But that just brings back the point. It seems like, most of us, we love fantasy over reality, or we can't even tell the difference between them. Of course, we know what religion does, and I'll be the first to admit that the origin of religion is very wise, and it comes from deep meditations and reflections on nature and existence. But when you, like I said, when you get into this, when theologians come into the game, and with all the religiosity, and then they start wanting to convert people, you got to ask yourself why. What interest do you have in converting me? What do you gain from this? So then everything becomes these fantastic stories, and these brutal stories too, and just the number of people that fight and argue and slaughter over these mythical notions. I mean, it just shows you how ultimately humanity is stupid. We can have cleverness, and especially in our age with the technological advancements in Western science, there's a lot of intelligence and cleverness, but there's no wisdom. So it's still stupid because nobody's looking at the big picture. What's really going on down here, which is still just as ugly as it was since day one. So, but of course, deep down, or it's unspeakable. We know this. So this is why we seek escapism, even in the form of knowledge. It's still escapism. Like even people who get out of religion and claim to be spiritual, I noticed that most of these people take the fact, and I'll use that in quotes, of reincarnation for granted. They just take it as a given, but they don't know why. Where did you get this concept from? Because if we look at our natural experience, people are temporary beings. Beings grow and decay and die. That's a natural process. This is the reason for procreation. For beings who want to remain alive, they have to procreate to, fuse and unite themselves into one being. That is how beings live on, and not through the spirit flying out of your body and flying into another womb. That's a fantastical, silly notion. But that's the thing. Everybody loves these narratives that give them this wow factor. It makes you go wow. And I know some of the things I talk about, they don't necessarily make you go wow. Some of the stuff is too heavy for most people. It's just ugly. It's the ugly truth. But it does set you free. But of course, you have to get through the pain part. The part of realizing that most of what you've been taught is bullshit, or most of what you think is bullshit. I mean, we live in the natural world, and the natural world is brutal, harsh. It's unfair. It's unjust, and life is basically birth and death. That's what it is. So, but people don't like to hear that. So they run to religion, they run to spirituality, and then it becomes just a bunch of deluded people, a bunch of deluded beings. So I'm very aware that this message is not for the vast majority, because this is the world of the man animal, and most men are base. Um, so of course they're gonna fall into these stupid religions. You know, they're not the most contemplative. And then you have the mediocre. The mediocre can be poured either way. They can be poured into wisdom or foolishness. If you notice on YouTube, of course, most of it is foolishness, or it's just misdirection. And a lot of things that we think are deep are really just shallow. So, because the deepest truths are simple, they're very simple. And they have to do with using reasoning, not necessarily using imagination. And that's what a lot of people don't get. A lot of things you think are knowledge, like things that on that Spirit Science channel, for instance, a lot of that stuff, it's intriguing, but when you turn the when you turn the video off, it was just a bunch of words. There's no internal transformation happening at a deep level that helps you realize, and it something that knocks all the legs off of the table of bullshit that you've been fed. Where you really change at a deep level, it doesn't happen because it's just too imaginative. And that's what, like I said, the screenwriters, theologians, and people like that do. Even these spiritual writers too. Same thing. And the guys like Deepak Chopra, of course, who try to superimpose this flowery effervescence on top of this zoo called life, which is nothing near flowery, as any serious thinker knows. So, because I was just talking to somebody about flat Earth, and this is why I brought this up. When you approach most people with flat Earth, it's just a knee-jerk reaction, of course. But prove it, and it's like you can't even get people to accept that their natural senses and experience, which counts as experiment. You can't get them to just accept that that counts as proof. They've been trained. We've all been trained to see authorities and things presented to us on TV and by way of pictures as authoritative proof that just trumps our natural senses and experience. I mean, that's total slavery. It's mental slavery, but we are bred and inculcated from such a young age that, most people don't question this. So, they think they're making a point, but they're not. They're just speaking for their masters, like lapdogs. But this really brings out the misanthrope in me too, because when you notice this, and I know, like I said, it's not everybody. Like I said, I really would like to see how many people are getting into flat Earth since Eric Dubé came out with his great delivery of this truth. I don't know what 5%. I don't know, maybe 2.5. Who knows? But it's just the vast majority of people. They're just gonna go along with the social herd because we're social animals, and the survival instinct trumps truth. So if I'm a social animal, I'm gonna have to go along with the herd irregardless, because the herd is headed towards the sustenance. So whatever they believe, I have to believe in order to survive. To go against that just seems like death or suicide. So, people just, even if they had the doubts, they're not going to question it for deeper reasons. It's not all about truth with most people. It's about fantasy over reality, because fantasy is better than reality. and everyone has it. Down from the most delusional tyrant to the most dreamy peasant. You know, I mean, it's all just, do you know the difference between fantasy and reality? But nobody wants to accept reality in their minds, or very few people want to accept reality in their minds, because, at least from their point of view, there's no benefit in that. So, just a short spiel on this whole delusion concept and this zoo of life. Peace.